This snout was literally a built-in ram to bash animals around, with one fatal case even being known of, wherein a Tylosaurus had rammed and smashed the brain case of a Mosasaurus apart, leading to a swift death. This odd diet was deduced by the shark's teeth, which weren't sharp or serrated, but were instead fairly flat plates that were designed to crush.
What?
Occasionally growing to be 17.1 meters or 56 feet long, and weighing over 10 tons. With such power and size, Mosasaurus became another one of the Western Interior Seaway's apex predators. This prehistoric body of water not only had the largest Mosasaurs of all time, but one of the largest crocodilians as well.
Jesus, oh my god, look at the size of that thing.
For many good reasons, you are probably much more willing to be dropped into the middle of nowhere on land, rather than in the ocean or sea.
Oh, for sure.
After all, it does appear that once you venture into the depths, life starts to become more disturbing. And this seems to be a common trend throughout history,
the fuck is
as
that?
Every point in time often has an animal or two lurking around in the waters.
This is reminding me of the storybooks and the museums that I've been to when I was little. There was this prehistoric ocean animal that looks kind of like this, but with a crocodile head. And it is so cool, but terrifying at the same time. And also, I think the right one here is another dinosaur where it has this spikes with a very thin layer. I also love this dinosaur, which is kind of funny, where my favorite dinosaurs are usually amphibious, at least. But I'm also terrified of deep body of water in general.
That was far scarier than anything found on land. Jurassic waters, home to giant pliosaurs, pre-Mesozoic oceans filled with giant cephalopods and sea scorpions.
Hold on, what? Sea scorpions? Oh, wait. What's that called? The sea cockroach? Isopod? Yeah, now thinking about it, it would make sense that there are sea worms, sea insects, right? That is like the worst combination ever. Not sure if I would like to find out or not.
And even a Cenozoic sea that was home to the largest shark of all time. However, all this paled in comparison to their winner.
Wait, what?
A body of water that existed during the late Cretaceous that was home to numerous animals that would put much of the marine predators of today to shame. Welcome, my friends, to the Western Interior Seaway, or as some people like to call it, Hell's Aquarium.
Ew.
While you may have never heard of this prehistoric shallow ocean or inland sea, there is a fair chance you've walked across it, or at least what's left of it.
Hold on, is this because the sea level was a lot higher back then? Because I know we've found some ocean remnants even on the mountains, right? What's so special about the seaway?
If you live in the United States, Mexico, or Canada.
Never been there.
Because when it was filled with water, it split these countries across, basically drawing a line through most of North America. Throughout this time, sea monsters could be found at every point, but some periods were unarguably worse than others, with the Western Interior Seaway having reached its climax and peak nopeness during the Campanian age of the late Cretaceous. At the time, the seaway was warm and tropical in nature while spanning 600 miles or 970 kilometers at its widest point.
Wow.
And measuring over 2,000 miles or 3,200 kilometers long. Additionally, it was remarkably shallow for its size, possibly only being 900 meters or 3,000 feet deep at its deepest point, compared to its perceived average depth of around 50 meters or 150 feet. Yet despite its smallish size, the Western Interior Seaway still managed to cram in a ridiculous amount of nightmarish predators.
I would assume it's because it's tropic, so more life forms can exist. Kind of like Megalodon, there was sufficient amount of food to sustain these giants existing, and their size provided not just safety to themselves, but also the ability to cover more ground or more water.
By far the most famous of these aquatic monsters, and likely the worst to swim into, were the Mosasaurs. This was an extinct group of aquatic reptiles that could grow to massive sizes, and were characterized by body shapes similar to that of monitor lizards. However, unlike their modern-day relatives, Mosasaurs had 4 paddle-like flippers instead of limbs. And their bodies were elongated and streamlined for maximum drag reduction.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about.
Depending on how advanced the said species was, these guys would have also swam like an eel in an undulating fashion, or as in later developed Mosasaurs, like a shark, as they had larger tail flukes that they used to propel themselves with surprising speed. These powerful swimmers completely dominated the Western Interior Seaway. Their success ultimately resulted in them enjoying a high level of diversification, as over 10 genera are known to have coexisted all at once. God. But despite their diversity, chances are you'd only be attacked by 3 kinds: the Platecarpus, Clidastes, and
unlike megalodons, we can find these, right? So like fossilized heads, the entire bone structure. So we know a lot more about these guys. That is so crazy to think about, that we knew these prehistoric giants and were able to come to a logical conclusion about their habits and all that. That is, science is so weird.
and Tylosaurus. As together, they represent the most abundant mosasaurs in this environment. Of the trio, the smallest was Clidastes, who was still by no means tiny, with certain specimens growing up to 6.2 meters or 20 feet in length, although it was much more narrow, which came with its own advantages as it allowed it to be an extremely agile hunter, who used its smooth teeth to catch a variety of fish and invertebrates within the shallowest parts of the seaway. Things start to further ramp up when moving on to the Platecarpus, as this abundant mosasaur was a tad bit bigger, with certain individuals measuring 24 feet or 7 meters from head to tail, while weighing about 1 ton. Close to the weight of giant Nile crocs, Africa's current largest predator.
That's a big boy. Oh my god. All right, I know crocodiles are also ancient, right? They didn't change much. Because to me, they look more dinosaur than any animal alive right now. Just look at their teeth. You know, it's jagged, it's uneven. I don't know, it's wild looking.
At this size, the Platecarpus should hopefully raise your thalassophobia more than Clidastes. And yet, ironically, it likely wasn't a huge threat to aquatic megafauna, since studies on its teeth have found them to have been extremely fragile, leading paleontologists to speculate that it feasted primarily on smaller fish and soft-tissued squid within deep waters. But don't relax too much, as the third most common mosasaur was a giant with an appetite to match, the Tylosaurus. This mosasaur was in most ways the same as others of its kind, just everything about it was much bigger, with adults being anywhere from 12 to 15.8 meters or 39 to 52 feet long, fairly similar to the length of a humpback whale, and making it one of the largest mosasaurs across the entire planet. Tylosaurus had teeth that were no joke, with matured individuals possessing up to 32 teeth at any given point, that were fairly similar to each other in nature, being large, thick, recurved, and finely serrated. And thanks to its size, Tylosaurus could pretty much bully anything it wanted to in its environment.
Tylosaurus is probably the most recognizable, at least to me. Any prehistoric museum, books, whatever you go, you'll see this guy. And the other one looks somewhat close to it, but with a neck that is a lot longer. I don't know what their names are, but even for someone like me who is not at all familiar with the prehistoric Earth, I was still able to recall these two creatures.
Playing the role of an apex predator and routinely hunted a wide range of animals, that is reflected by its stomach contents.
They can eat these? Like, god damn. But stomach remains? How? Okay, so they are very rare. Either it's low oxygen environment or rapid burial where they sink into very soft mud. They get completely buried before bacteria and scavengers can come and pick on. So yeah, it looks like it is possible. That is so interesting. Like, what?
The Tylosaurus is believed to have mostly utilized ambushes during these hunts, where it would strike unsuspecting prey at high speeds, and possibly deploying a secret weapon as well, its snout. This snout was quite unique to Tylosaurus, with it being proportionally very long and having all teeth situated farther back, meaning that the front was pure bone. The tip of the snout was also fitted with a robustly built knob that was backed by shock compression structures, leading to the belief that this snout was literally a built-in ram that Tylosaurus used to bash animals around. And evidence shows that Tylosaurus was quite liberal with the use of this weapon, being a hyper-aggressive animal that attacked nearly everything.
What? Oh my god. Is there any ocean animal that does the same thing? I guess maybe swordfish? Kinda? Okay, not really. But why? Why would you develop that in the first place?
Even the rarer yet equally deadly Mosasaurus was sometimes attacked, with one fatal case even being known of, wherein a Tylosaurus had rammed and smashed the brain case of a Mosasaurus apart, leading to a swift death. Don't get it twisted though, as Mosasaurus still held the distinction of the largest mosasaur and therefore predator in these waters, occasionally growing to be 17.1 meters or 56 feet long, and weighing over 10 tons. And while it didn't have a battering ram like Tylosaurus did, Mosasaurus arguably had the deadlier bite, with its skull being relatively large for its body, allowing for a row of giant teeth that were made for slicing and dicing. Each tooth possessed two opposite cutting edges as well as prisms that ran down the sides. helping each bite to cut deeper while simultaneously improving the overall gripping
that made
strength.
me
Its bite was also much more powerful, with
gave me
studies
shivers.
suggesting a bite force of between 13,000 and 16,000 pounds per square inch. With such power and size, Mosasaurus became another one of the western
I don't like
interior
that.
seaway's apex
Ew.
predators, having a diet just as diverse as the Tylosaurus's. And again, similar to its relative, it is thought to have employed ambush hunting to capture prey. Unlike sharks, these giants didn't rely on a keen sense of smell to target prey. Rather, they had powerful binocular vision that provided pristine views in the murkiest of waters. Remarkably, despite holding the title of the biggest predators, the Mosasaurs did not have the deadliest jaws in these waters, as that title went to a predator that coasted the most outer edges of the western interior seaway, the Dinosuchus.
Oh.
Yep, that's right. This prehistoric body of water not only had the largest Mosasaurs of all time, but one of the largest crocodilians as well. Currently, scientists are not positive on the extent of the Dinosuchus's presence in the region, but it's thought that it definitely inhabited bays, estuaries, and the coast, while perhaps venturing into deeper waters as well from time to time, since specimens have been found in marine deposits.
Jesus, oh my god, look at the size of that thing. Holy fuck. Yeah, again, they don't look too different to the crocodiles we have now. That's an interesting thing to me, how perfectly designed they are for them to exist till this day without too much changes, at least visually, right?
Furthermore, it definitely lived on both the eastern and western side of the seaway. To the east, Dinosuchus grew to smaller sizes but were far more plentiful, while in the west they were fewer but far larger, reaching 12 meters or 39 feet in length.
Interesting.
This obviously isn't very close to the length of the largest Mosasaurs, though Dinosuchus was far more robust in build, allowing it to stand its ground when it came to weight, with estimates suggesting a maximum of around 8.5 tons. Disregarding weight, Dinosuchus had the advantage of more impregnable defenses, since, like many crocodilians, it too was covered in osteoderms. However, Dinosuchus was a bit unique in that its osteoderms were much larger and heavier than normal. In fact, when they were first recovered, paleontologists confused them for the armor of an Ankylosaurus. These homegrown armored plates would have covered the back of adults and were hemispherical in shape.
I heard that even the crocodiles nowadays, their scales can stop bullets. Maybe from a pistol round? I don't know how true that is, but if it is, imagine what the Dinosuchus is. Well, we don't have to imagine because we have the fossils. What can it stop, man?
Overall, these osteoderms made Dinosuchus one of the better equipped animals in the waters, but what really made it stick out was its monstrous bite, with some studies estimating a bite force of over 100,000 newtons, 5 times the power needed to crush a car. This staggering amount of energy would have been channeled into their robust teeth that were sharper towards the front and blunter towards the back, suggesting that this croc was designed to crush things to death rather than tear. The coasts
Makes
and
sense.
shallow reefs of this prehistoric seaway were no doubt a terrible place to be if trying to avoid the largest predators around. But the more open waters were home to their own share of nightmares too, including rather peculiar cephalopods to say the least. Cretaceous cephalopods like those of today were still found in shallow water, but they held a much more expansive range in the deeper areas compared to others. Despite not being as big or as bad as the Mosasaurs, they still feasted on whatever was floating around, as western interior seaway cephalopods were among the biggest of their kind, even rivaling the size of living krakens today, like the colossal and giant squid. Two of the better known large cephalopods from those times were Tusoteuthis and Ankoteuthis, both members of the now extinct Ankoteuthinae family. These two sea monsters were incredibly similar, so much so in fact that paleontologists often like to argue on if a recovered specimen belongs to one or the other. What we do know though is that they were big, frightening looking, and confusing. Confusing in the sense that they had the appearance of a girthy, relatively short squid, and yet were more related to modern octopus than living squids.
Wait, what? So I guess they're kind of the ancestor of both? That makes me wonder, how smart are these guys? If their brain actually matches their body size, that would be insane, no? So probably not.
In their youth, these cephalopods were quite small and vulnerable to attacks, with paleontologists believing that they actually made up the bulk of a lot of aquatic animals' diets, backed by prehistoric fish stomach contents. However, in response to being fish food, these cephalopods adapted by maturing rapidly and showing extreme size variation among individuals, leading to some specimens being about the size of your arm, while others could get 3 meters or 10 feet long.
What?
At this size, these guys were active predators and turned the tables on their once would-be attackers, typically eating fish, invertebrates, and even baby mosasaurs and plesiosaurs.
Oh my god.
Akin to how octopus hunt, Tusoteuthis and Ankoteuthis would have used their 10 tentacles, lined with suckers, to ensnare prey, which were then swiftly ushered into their waiting beaks. And at the very same time, there were horrors swimming around that we are all too familiar with, including sharks. They may not have been the true kings of the time, but they were still highly successful, playing the role of both scavengers and active predators. Like many, these Cretaceous sharks apparently had a touch of gigantism. Size didn't necessarily mean the sharks made the waters deadlier, since the biggest of them all, the Tylosaurus, was actually relatively harmless to most. This was a mackerel shark the size of a whale shark, primarily ate anything with a shell or exoskeleton. This odd diet was deduced by the shark's teeth, which weren't sharp or serrated, but were instead fairly flat plates that were designed to crush.
What? That's so cool. What the hell? So it's made to almost like hydropress something. Do we have any animals with similar design?
These teeth were abundant, sometimes numbering over 500 and could be absolutely huge.
Yo, this is so cool. Look at that. They have this curly thing on it. It's almost like our fingerprints to provide more grip, right? That is so smart. That is so fucking cool.
These robust teeth would have allowed the shark to easily crush a variety of slow, hard-moving prey like crustaceans or turtles.
Why'd you gotta draw him like this, man? It looks like he's dead inside. Oh, another turtle. Ah, no variety. Look at him.
Not all sharks are this docile though, as when you do go down in size, you run into a still fairly big, yet much more voracious, toothy fish, the Crocodylus. Like Tylosaurus, this was a mackerel shark, but this one bore a striking resemblance to our very own great white, while also sharing an oddly similar lifestyle, even though the two are not closely related. Such a diet indicates a hyper-aggressive animal and brings up the question of how it achieved such a feat. Well, the secret lay in its size and locomotion, as despite sometimes being 8 meters or 26 feet long and weighing over 5 tons, it was still ridiculously fast, evidenced by the pattern of its placoid scales, which reduced drag and were organized in a fashion only seen in the fastest living sharks. Additionally, Crocodylus had the most extreme case of a type 4 tail fin seen in any mackerel shark, and models estimate that this giant could have topped speeds of 70 kilometers or 43 miles per hour, where its powerful jaws would have then come into play, dealing catastrophic damage, as they were lined with rows of razor-sharp teeth, which were bigger than those even seen in great whites.
Wait, how were we able to model it? Or even knew what its fin looks like?
Fossil remains support the notion of high-speed attacks too, but the fin nightmares didn't stop with it, the Squalicorax, better known by its nickname, the crow shark. It too is a mackerel shark. However, it was quite a bit smaller, normally measuring between 1.8 meters or 5.9 feet and 4.8 meters or 16 feet in length, similar to the size of a tiger shark. And its likeness to the tiger of the ocean went beyond its size, as its teeth were remarkably similar too, being numerous, relatively small, curved, and serrated, perfect for cutting and sawing through tough tissue. With such deadly teeth, the crow shark was capable of devouring many kinds of food that largely overlapped with the diet of the Crocodylus, with the major difference being that it went for the smaller individuals. It also developed a unique skill, hunting the rulers of the sky. The crow shark has been known on more than one occasion to have successfully attacked large pterosaurs, namely the pteranodon.
Wait, what? How?
Which suggests that it had excellent vision that it used to track pterosaurs when they were getting ready to dive for a fish.
Oh.
And speaking of fish, crow sharks were pretty good at hunting them too, with many specimens containing large amounts of fish within their stomachs.
I feel like that all makes sense, right? A common thing that you see is that they don't focus on one species as their primary food source. I feel like this supports my very uneducated guess that there's just a massive, incredible amount of life forms being crammed into this waterway, and to support their giant size, they couldn't be picky. But also I want to look up, because how do we know so much about these sharks when they don't fossilize? This is way before Megalodon, right? Okay, I actually found this pretty old article in 2014 that we actually unearthed a complete entire crow shark from tip to tail. That's why we know so much more about it compared to Megalodon, even though it is way older than it. Doesn't this mean that there's a non-zero chance of we finding a Megalodon that is as well preserved as this Croc right here? I mean, the chance is low, right? But hey, they're everywhere, right?
However, you really can't forget that there was one more iconic group present, the plesiosaurs.
Yes.
These guys, like the Mosasaurs, had 4 flippers, but the similarities stopped here, as plesiosaurs had broad flat bodies and short weak tails, while their necks could also be comically long, giving certain members the longest neck to body ratio of any reptile. To swim, they would have flapped their flippers in a flying motion and mostly stuck to the shallower waters. So far, multiple kinds are known to have inhabited the western interior seaway, with the bulk being plesiosauroids, while a few species of polycotyllids were present too. Some of them could get quite long and were typically over 15 feet or 5 meters from head to tail, with the longest having been the Elasmosaurus and Albertonectes, both of whom grew to around 11.6 meters or 38 feet.
Oh, what is the spill? Oh my god, it looks so funny. The composition makes it look so goofy. I don't know why. Man, this creature is like 60% neck. Probably more.
Such length gave them the longest necks of all time, and the Elasmosaurus actually had the most vertebrae of any known animal.
They look
quite
kind
the
of cute.
accomplishment. But despite their daunting lengths and appearances, these long-necked reptiles didn't really have voracious diets.
Wait, they're reptiles?
As they were simply highly specialized for small prey, given the narrow nature of their mouths and necks. In addition to fish, it is believed that they also hunted snails, clams, and other small creatures. So, while not apex predators, these guys were no doubt still highly skilled and successful, as demonstrated by their extreme level of diversity. Which brings up the question of where did they and the rest of the crazy animals that called these waters home go? Well, some seem to have had a slow decline, or in other cases, evolved into something else. Animals also had to deal with the fact that the seaway was constantly shrinking.
Yeah, it started to dry
Although,
out.
what really changed the seaway for good was the asteroid that slammed into Earth 66 million years ago,
Yep.
causing extreme disruption and damage, to say the least. The impact was especially bad here compared to other bodies of water, considering that the giant rock touched down rather close, sending a giant tsunami, as well as other unpleasantries through the waters, as evidenced by fish found with iridium in their gills. This devastation wiped out many of the more iconic sea monsters and finally brought an end to Hell's Aquarium.
Wait, that sounds insane. Doesn't that mean the impact debris flew at such velocity that it lodged inside them and they died very shortly after to be preserved with those minerals still lodged inside them? What the hell? I don't even have the words for it. But that has been a super interesting video to watch because, like I said, I know pretty much zero about prehistoric times. Like back in school, we did try to remember all the ages, Cretaceous, whatever, but I barely remembered any of it. I don't even know what time frame the T-Rexes lives in. So all of this feels like a new discovery to me, and without getting good grades or exams in the way, I feel like this is a much more enjoyable experience that actually makes me want to know more about them. But yeah, as always, the link to the original video will be down in the description. And I also did a reaction to Megalodons and learned how the pop culture portrait of Megalodon was completely a lie. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time.